Finishing her work for the evening, Sei Takanashi sighs. It's 11 p.m. She's worked another night of overtime. She closes her laptop and heads out. Returning home, she gives a "Tadaima," but it's not like that matters. No one else lived here. She takes one step, and magic light envelops her, summoning her to a mysterious place where people who looked like they'd belong to a Renaissance fair awe at her. They couldn't believe it worked. They knew the Grand Magus could do it. Sei looked around, spotting another high school-aged girl adjacent to her with a look of angst. A man with long red hair burst in boisterously, saying, "'Twould seem the ritual was a grand success." He advanced towards the girls and bowed, saying it was a great honor to meet them, but only towards the younger girl. Sei would receive an explanation after. Since ancient times, the kingdom of Salutania has lived within a shrouded miasma which warped the bodies and minds of living creatures, turning them into terrible monsters that ravaged the world. While the kingdom's order of knights fought to protect them all, there were periods when the miasma grew too thick to keep the beasts at bay. During those periods, a holy maiden called the Saint would appear, who used her power to obliterate monsters. Some say her mere presence lifted the weight of the miasma. Her existence shined as a light of hope for the citizens, or so it was written in their ancient texts. Sei reflected back on Crown Prince Kyle, whisking the other girl away as the saint, while leaving her behind. The man before her continued on, saying in dire times, when a saint didn't appear, the kingdom's sages devised a saint-summoning ritual. Sei would try to leave mid-explanation, but the knight tried to stop her, reasoning the miasma must especially be bad if two saints were summoned. But all Sei wanted to know was how to return home. With her heading for the door, the next man politely asked her, the holy saint, where she was going. He tried his best to get her to stay to at least hear them out a bit longer. But by evening, he apologized on behalf of Prince Kyle's rude behavior towards her. She accepted she wasn't going back, and that she'd have to learn how to live in this world. She agreed to stay here in the palace, but asked that he please stop calling her Holy Saint. 2 weeks later, she was incredibly bored with nothing to do. No one has come to talk to her since. She wondered if they were doing this on purpose. She had a maid, but she couldn't spend every waking moment talking to her. No TV, no phone, just one room. On the bright side, she was very relaxed. She decided to take a stroll in the garden and was so happy to see some fresh lavender. It smelled just like the lavender from our world. She wondered if plants here were the same too. She'd be surprised by the green-haired man behind her giving a greeting. He was glad to hear she thought the plants were wonderful and told her to look all she liked. These medicinal herbs were used to craft potions for research. From angelica to rosemary, every plant had its own potent effects, from relieving fatigue to inducing sleep. Sei was quizzical. Potions? She thought those only existed in video games. She learned it was Jude's job. He worked down the way at the Research Institute of Medicinal Flora. He took her to visit, and she really enjoyed her time. Jude hoped she'd stop by again soon. The maid pointed out she certainly seemed in good spirits as of late. Sei explained that she was really into plants and herbs back in our world. Visiting the institute again, she'd be greeted by Director Johann. Hearing she wanted to live here, he asked if she wanted to become an official researcher. She pondered on this, thinking she'd accept it if she was allowed, but thought there's no way it could be that easy. She accepted with a lot of vigor, and so Johann promised to get the formalities sorted. She got full permission, and all her belongings were given to her packed in a suitcase. Everything else was already transported to the institute. Introducing herself to her coworkers, Johann decided Jude would be her instructor. For her first lesson, he presented a potion, and they'd begin making one together. It's about what you'd expect goes into potion making, boiling water and adding herbs. But then, once heated, they were to imbue it with magic power. Sei asked how to use magic, and Jude was stun-locked. He couldn't believe she's never used magic before. He demonstrated, turning the liquid pink, and then presented her the potion. He was a bit bashful, since he could only make low-grade potions. He decided to next begin with helping her learn to cast magic herself. He grabbed her hands and channeled magic into her. He wanted her to focus on the sensation. She felt it, something circulating through her body. She got a little nervous hearing him telling her to make a potion next, and while she poured her magic, she had no idea how much she was supposed to add. She kept going, but Johann suddenly stopped her. They then congratulated her on making her first potion. Returning to her room at night, she looked at it, then looked out the window at the the big moon and smiled. The next day, she got a knock on the door from a coworker who had questions about one of the potions she crafted. She later explained to Jude that her potions were 50% effective. She didn't do anything different, just what Jude had taught her. It even looked the same color as any low-grade potion. To give an example, he presented a mid-grade, which had a light pink hue, and a high-grade, which seemed darker. He told her not to get any ideas, because they were really tough to craft. No one at the Institute could make them, so they had to order. She told him to look on the bright side. Anyone who used her potions gets a lucky little bonus. He thought 50% was too much to be just luck. A few months after, the knights stumbled on a desecrated place in the forest. Unknowing, a monster was creeping up on them. Jude couldn't believe Sei could actually craft high-grade potions. Sei thought she still made a lot of mistakes. This was only her third one. Jude was a little jealous, since she'd only been here for 3 months, and she kept making piles upon piles of potions. He couldn't believe she never ran out of magic power. He teased that Johann was going to scold her again. Her potions were too strong for them to sell in the civilian marketplace, and if she kept this up, they'd be out of herbs to make potions with, all while she covered her ears, pretending she couldn't hear him. Johann suddenly burst in with an emergency, telling the two to gather up all the healing potions they had. He explained that a week ago, the Third Order of Knights ventured into the western woods to subjugate the growing population of monsters, but were attacked by a salamander and suffered heavy casualties. Many were gravely wounded. They were going to head to the royal palace to assist them at once. On their way, she asked Jude if salamanders were a type of dragon, but would learn that, while not, they were a type of fire-breathing lizard. She thought the concept of them to be ridiculous. Arriving to where the injured soldiers were, her eyes widened. They were all badly hurt. While they dispensed the potions to the knights, Sei overheard some of the men asking how things were this bad, and the saint nowhere to be seen. They heard she could use high-level healing spells, but supposedly, Prince Kyle said the saint was not to bear witness to such a horrific scene. With the other saint being a young girl, Sei thought it made sense she might not be able to handle all this. Johann would suddenly call Sei for some high-grade potions, and she rushed, finding the knight captain presumably on his deathbed. She was horrified, but would quickly try to administer one of her high grades. She told him over and over he had to drink it, but he was far too unconscious. She kept telling him to drink it, and eventually he did, and his body began to emanate with miraculous light. All his wounds began to disappear, and when he opened his eyes, her face was the first thing he saw. He smiled as he closed his eyes, and his breathing steadied. Johann would tell her this man was an old friend of his, and was so thankful she saved his life. That evening, Johann would make a full report on Sei's potions. His superiors speculated that the efficacy increase was likely due to her being a saint, but Johann told him it was still too early to determine. Even then, Johann was asked to report any important details. The following day, Johann asked Sei if there's anything she wants, because they received bonus funding for their assistance with the Salamander event. And of course, she was responsible for their success. So, she mentioned she had something in mind. After a week, she was thrilled to see her new kitchen, though she was shocked at how quickly it was put together. Johann was surprised that this was all she wanted, but she claimed to be no noblewoman, and she cooked for herself. By the kingdom's standards, she was quite well educated in matters outside of her specialism in herbology. He'd offered to have a chef work in her kitchen, but Sei declined, letting him know she enjoyed cooking, when really in truth, she thought the cooking here was downright awful. Johann decided to wait so he could get a taste of her homeland's cuisine, and he allowed her to use the budget to buy the ingredients she needed. Sei decided to make herb-crusted chicken with a light salad. She planned to use some of the medicinal herbs in cooking, but Johann had never heard of a chef using medicinal herbs before. After cooking, she served him, and upon taking a bite, he thought it tasted amazing. He would then ask her to teach the chef some of her homeland's recipes. While doing so, Jude informed that the director wanted her to deliver some documents to the Third Order barracks. He'd then be captivated by the food on the table, so Sei told him not to eat too much as she left to deliver the papers. When she got there, Johann told her to sit for a bit. She met Albert Hawk, the Knight Commander of the Third Order of Knights. Sei was captivated by his beautiful blue-gray eyes. She had seen a lot of handsome men in this world, but out of all of them, he was the one who was most her type. She thought this world was wonderful. Johann told her that Albert was the man whom she treated with a high-grade potion. He healed up quite well. The director then decided to go have Sei gather some ingredients in the southern woods. Albert's order was already due for an expedition there, so he asked Sei to accompany him. With the knights, she wouldn't have to worry about monsters there, so she agreed to follow. Unlike you, would you like this video and subscribe to my channel? Beep, boop, it's me, ComfyTea. I am an AI slop garbage channel, not a real person. Guys, you like my AI impression? Well, I don't like it when you watch their videos instead of mine. Because here at my Shoujo Weekly, I'm covering interesting content on a weekly basis made from blood, sweat, and tears from me, a real anime boy. You'll find romance. You'll find drama. You'll find pretty boys. Not just me. And if you're new to the channel and looking for a completed series to binge, I've got a whole playlist for you to watch. So come on, hit that subscribe, or I'm gonna lose to AI. During the expedition, Jude warned Sei not to stray too far. She was caught up, staring at a herb she'd never seen before. But Albert assured her they were keeping a close watch on her, so there was nothing to worry about. However, they both found it strange that they hadn't encountered any monster so deep in the woods. Afterwards, Sei prepared a pot of soup that everyone loved. Albert loved it so much that he felt jealous of those at the Institute who got to eat luxurious meals every day. She shifted away from him, feeling nervous because he was sitting beside her. But Albert ended up getting even closer as she continued to ramble about the medicinal herbs she added into the soup. She was a bit flush after he thanked her for the meal. She came home exhausted that evening and flopped on the bed, but not exhausted like she'd been in her past life. This was a good feeling. The following day, Johann told Sei they received a startling report from the Third Order of Knights. During the expedition, the Knights' physical abilities were significantly heightened, and while investigating, someone speculated it could have been the lunch they had. The researchers came together to eat this cooking for every meal, and found that, depending on the type of recipe, they all saw improvements in various physical abilities. Hence, the 50% increase in efficacy measured in Sei's potions were also found in her cooking. The director told her not to cook in public again, because this could lead to chaos. He would also tell Sei to take the rest of the day off. Besieged by boredom once again, she would go to the library to learn more about herbs and pharmacology. Upon seeing Elizabeth Ashley, she became distracted. Seeing the book she had, Elizabeth figured Sei was with the Institute, because only a few people could read classical Salutanian. After that, Albert found Sei heading back to the Institute and offered to give her a ride. She had never ridden a horse before, but he took her into his arms, carrying her like a maiden. Sei was flustered as he held onto her, and they set off. As they chatted, Albert's voice was so close to her hair, and it made her a little nervous. But for some reason, speaking with him made her feel so at ease. Hearing that Sei had no other hobbies, Albert wanted to ask her something, but suddenly decided to disregard it. Although she told him he didn't have to take her all the way back, he still did. After that, the commander would give her a ride back from the palace quite often. Sei would also run into Elizabeth at the library quite often, enough to befriend her. They were close enough now that she called Elizabeth by her nickname. Liz complimented Sei's lovely skin, claiming it was easy for one's skin to tan in this hot season. But Sei's own had only grown more lovely. Sei mentioned that she used medicinal herbs to make her skin products, and she offered to make some for her. Liz became distraught, thinking upon the endless struggle for beauty, but she was also thinking about someone else. She decided to tell Sei what this was all about. The trouble started when a girl joined the class mid-semester. She grew unusually close with a number of boys who were already betrothed, and it caused quite a ruckus at the academy. Many warned her what would happen if she continued, but to no avail. Eventually, one of the boys' fiancés stopped attending classes. She was just the right age for acne to be a constant problem, not to mention a constant source of anxiety for her. She started comparing herself to the new popular girl. Liz felt if her skin condition was resolved, then the girl's confidence would return. Sei thought about helping, which got Liz really excited. Later on, Jude found Sei working on some cosmetics. She just wanted to get rid of her eye bags, since her eyesight was better now. He'd get close to her face, complimenting how pretty she had gotten since arriving here. Sei didn't really enjoy the teasing. A few weeks later, Liz introduced her to Nicole Adler, the girl they discussed the other day. Sei then gave Nicole the lotion she crafted, but Nicole was still afraid what would happen if it didn't work. So, Sei advised her to try it at her leisure. Liz suddenly grabbed the lotion, applying it on the back of her hand, and she was stunned by how incredible it was. She advised Nicole that instead of trying to look a certain way for someone else, she should try to look lovely for her own sake. Afterwards, Nicole sent a letter, thanking them for helping her be more confident, and invited Sei to a tea party. Word of Sei's cosmetics had also begun spreading throughout the academy and nearby town. Liz teased that Sei's beauty was not only due to her crafted cosmetics, but because she was in the midst of a budding romance. There were rumors of a young lady melting the Ice Knight's frozen heart, who was none other than Albert. On another day, Sei got fed up with the heat, so she asked Ju to make some cold water with magic. She wanted to cool off by soaking her feet in the water. He warned her not to let anyone see her, because it was considered improper for a lady to show her bare feet. Sei asked for some ice, but there were only a few people who could use ice magic. While Sei was enjoying her cool-off session, she didn't expect Albert to suddenly come in. He'd leave her startled, knocking over the bucket. After cleaning up, she opened the door and the commander apologized for intruding. Then, he asked her to come to the capital with him, so she could relax a bit on her day off. They both agreed to meet up the next morning. At that moment, Sei completely forgot that she'd be going with the Ice Knight, who seemed to melt in her presence. Arriving at the capital, Albert held her hand as they headed towards the market, and it made Sei feel embarrassed. He would bring her closer when someone nearly bumped into her. Then, they decided to stop for a bite at one of the food stands. When he brought the food, she was expecting something a little different, and mentioned he seemed used to this. Albert told her he and Johann used to come here when they were younger, though they'd often sneak out. So, he asked her to keep it a secret. Sei would then take a bite of the snack and gushed at how good it tasted, but she wished the drink was more chilled. Albert then made some ice cubes with his magic, making her drink much better. After that, he'd take her hand once more as they went to visit different shop fronts. In a jewelry store, Sei admired a beautiful silver hairpin, but the price was even more incredible. Since it was out of her budget, she decided to come back for it another time. On the way back, she fell asleep on Albert's shoulder. When he woke her, she was embarrassed, knowing he had seen her asleep. Arriving at the institute, Sei thanked him for the day. He'd give her a present, telling her not to open it until she got to her room. When she got there, she saw it was the same hairpin she was admiring at the jewelry store. The following day, while Sei submitted a report to Johann, he asked her how her day off went. After she told him, he was glad to hear her date went well, but she didn't understand what he meant by date. Even though Albert had invited her to the city, Johann claimed he wouldn't invite a woman he wasn't interested in. He thought Albert might have been cold to her, but she admitted he was quite kind, explaining all the things Albert did for her. However, Sei thought it was something the upper class did for women. When she showed the hair ornament the commander got for her, Johann explained that Albert wouldn't give her that as a mere souvenir. When Elizabeth met with Sei at the library, she could easily tell that her hair ornament was a gift from Albert. The precious stone set into the ornament was the same color as his eyes. She also said it was common for men to gift women they fancy items that matched the color of their eyes. Sei was flustered, blushing hard because she wasn't used to this kind of attention. Later on, Jude informed Sei that her hair ornament was reacting to her magic power. He brought Johann to take a look, and the director confirmed it. However, very few people had the ability to enchant items. Johann then proposed bringing someone to teach Sei how to do it. Sei was then taken to the Royal Magi Assembly. One of the instructors began to explain the theory of enchantment. First, she'd have to select a focus, and then channel her magic into it while thinking upon the desired enchantment. The possible effects were dependent on the caster's elemental affinity, as well as the quality of the focus selected. When Sei asked if it was possible to completely resist one type of magic, the instructor told her it'd be difficult. However, if she were able to cast holy affinity magic, then she could enchant it with a slight mitigation to a particular affinity. The instructor then handed her a focus that would be well suited for the enchantment. Sei focused on trying to have her enchantment mitigate damage for all affinities, but she didn't expect to break the focus. Erhardt then approached her, asking if she was really trying to imbue it with damage mitigation for one affinity. When she told him the truth, he gave her a stronger focus. This time, it didn't break. Using his appraisal magic, Erhardt checked it and confirmed it was a successful enchantment. He started giving her different pieces of foci and asked her to imbue them with different enchantments. Sei's last task was to create an enchantment to resist all status ailments, physical damage, and magic damage. She doubted she could make it resist both physical and magic, but she could have it increase physical and magic defense instead. So, Erhardt permitted her to do so. Sei completed it, and Erhardt confirmed it was another successful enchantment. He would give her one of them for her great work. A few weeks later, word about the foci Sei had enchanted reached the knightly orders. So, Erhardt asked for her assistance to create some for the knights, and she didn't mind helping. At the Royal Magi Assembly, she noticed the mages looked very exhausted. Erhardt explained they started work early most days, but it wasn't always like this. They were told to ensure the knights' request was fulfilled before their next expedition, and it was a request from the First Order of Knights. He had ordered the assembly not to mention her enchantments, but it seemed someone's tongue slipped. He apologized for the inconvenience, but Sei didn't mind. She wanted to go get some potions, but Erhardt asked her to remain seated while he went to retrieve them. By evening, he was shocked to see the amount of work she had done, and she told him she would have it all completed by tomorrow. Erhardt would appraise them and compliment her excellent work. So much so that he smiled, which left the other shocked. When he asked how Say wanted to be compensated, she had an idea. Later, she would visit Albert, bringing him some desserts she had made. She tried to leave immediately, but he asked about the other package in the basket. Upon opening it, he saw a pendant, which she had enchanted to mitigate the magic damage of all affinities. The Knight Commander would get on his knees, kissing her hand, and that was the last thing Say remembered before going home. On one night, Erhardt brought a focus before His Majesty, King Siegfried, Salutania. It was enchanted with increased physical defense, magical defense, and resist all status ailments. Truly an item of legendary power. Erhardt concluded that Say's ability in holy affinity magic was matched only by the Grand Magus himself, though she may be even more powerful than that. Seeing that Say had this much power after less than a year of summoning, Siegfried believed it was logical to conclude that she was the saint. Erhardt argued that they couldn't determine yet, explaining that the only person who could appraise Say was the Grand Magus. They would know if she is the saint when the Magus awakens from his deep slumber. While watering some flowers, Say blushed, remembering how Albert kissed her hand. She was startled when Jude approached her. He told her that the director wanted everyone who was free to lend a hand in making a big delivery of potions to the Third Order. Recalling how Johann had scolded her for making a lot of potions, Say decided to help with the delivery. When she came to make the delivery, Sir Wolf and some other knights asked how the Institute made such high-quality potions, but she told them it was a secret. Say was shocked when Wolf mentioned they'd be needing even more potions next time because they were going on a joint expedition with the Second Order. The extra numbers were for safety, since they'd be heading into Gauche Forest, where the salamander attack happened. When she asked about the First Order joining, the knights seemed reluctant to talk about them. Wolf mentioned that the First Order was helping out the Crown Prince, Kyle, who had gone with his academic entourage into the eastern woods to train. The knights wondered how much training they would actually get in the area, because it was said to be relatively peaceful. There was nothing to battle with there. They found it surprising since Kyle was with the saint, Ira Misono. The prince and his friends were keeping a close eye on her at the academy. However, Say was happy to hear that she was doing okay. The knights then complimented Say, saying she looked more saintly than Ira. Although everyone liked to joke about it, Say speculated she herself was the actual saint. But she didn't feel like going out and announcing it to the world, because she wouldn't be able to live like a regular person again. Say couldn't get the conversation with the knights out of her head. She kept thinking about Ira, and from what she heard, Ira didn't have any cheat code powers like she did. The only explanation she could think of for their difference in power was that she was the real saint, while Ira wasn't. But she didn't want that to be true. Johann then came in, and upon seeing how many potions she had crafted, he kicked her out of the lab. Since Say had the rest of the day off, she decided to do some research on how to make her potions even better than high grade. At the library, she found a book on holy affinity magic, and started thinking of a way to help the knights outside of just making potions. The book was a little bit too complicated, which made her search for one more suited for beginners. Siegfried would approach her and give her a simpler book to start with. However, Say had no idea who he was. He then properly introduced himself to her and thanked her while apologizing for his son's rude behavior when she arrived. Say freaked out when she finally realized she was meeting the king. Wanting to reward her for the deeds she had done for the kingdom, Siegfried offered her land, a court title, or even her own estate in the capital. With her declining it all, he had already expected it, considering Johann informed her that she would. Before leaving, the king promised to thank Say properly in court. Later, while working in the lab, Say mistakenly cut her finger, but with a single whisper, she healed the wound. She was amazed. It took a while, but she was so glad she powered through to learn this. When Jude came in, she quickly packed up the lunch she was making to take it to the knights who had just returned from their expedition. Meeting with the knights, they mentioned that the expedition was quite an ordeal, but thanks to her potions, they made it back. She spent some time with them and shared the snacks she brought. Then, Say went to see Wolf and was shocked to see that he had lost a hand. This wasn't something potions could help with. He would have to find a high-level mage who could use holy magic to heal it, but they weren't easy to find. Wolf then thanked Say for coming to visit, feeling happy that they could talk one last time. He planned to quit the order and head back home, since he couldn't keep being a knight like this. He was a commoner who rose up through the academy to become a knight. With him quitting the order, he wouldn't be allowed to stay in the palace anymore. He tried remaining positive, but no one could be in a situation like this. Say thought if she helped him, she could no longer pretend to be an ordinary person. But she couldn't just walk away. Upon casting her healing magic, Wolf's arm returned to normal, and he thanked her from the bottom of his heart. She responded, "You're welcome?" and he couldn't believe she was saying it like a question. The other knights were stunned seeing this. However, Sei decided to heal every single one of them. Soon after, the knights were all talking loudly about how amazing she was. She had healed almost everyone. The only ones left had only cuts and bruises. She decided to try the high-level holy magic spell she found in the book Siegfried gave her. She started by focusing magic throughout her body and imagined it filling the whole room. Sei would then cast an area healing spell that cured all their wounds. Johann and Albert were there to witness it. Sei explained that she was trying to live up to everyone's expectations, and she apologized for showing off. But the director commended her for doing well and held her close. As she apologized some more, he told her, "Don't be." Word began spreading fast about Sei's display, and she would have to be escorted home from the library. Johann told her that the Second Order had begun whispering about her being the saint, and apparently they weren't the only ones. He then mentioned that the Royal Magi Assembly were ready to have her and her abilities appraised to find out if she was truly the saint. Days later, on her way to getting appraised, Sei looked a bit sad. Ever since that day in the hospital, every person in every corner of the kingdom had been saying she was the saint. The only reason she and Ira hadn't been appraised was that the Grand Magus fell into a coma after the saint summoning ritual. But now he had awakened. Johann then told her that the monster population had steadily decreased after the summoning, which meant the saint was definitely summoned. In the past, the saint would go with the knightly orders on expeditions because only she could eradicate the land of monsters. So, it was safe to believe the kingdom expected the same duties of the current saint. Sei had never been near a battle before. The world she came from was peaceful, so she didn't know if she could fight. Johann informed her that she'd have to go through some training first, which was what Ira was doing at the academy. If Sei wasn't the saint, then Ira would take up those duties. However, she'd still be asked to join them in a support role, seeing as mages who could cast healing magic were few and far in between. Even if she had to help, she wanted to remain at the Institute instead of moving to the Royal Magi Assembly. Arriving, Sei could already hear whispers from the mages, talking about the rumors of how she was the saint. After that, she was introduced to the Grand Magus, Yuri Drevis. Staring at him, she thought Yuri looked like he stepped out of a painting. Sei wondered when she got surrounded by all these gorgeous guys. Yuri would then reveal that Erhardt was the magus and second in command. Sei didn't know that he was that high-ranking, and was more shocked to find out that he was Albert's brother as well. Yuri would then ask her to try and relax, because appraisal magic required the target's conscious consent. As he activated the spell, everyone else was left shocked. Apparently, Sei somehow resisted the spell, though not purposefully. Yuri concluded that this meant her magic power was higher than his. He concluded the appraisal session and asked her to show how she casted spells. Sei demonstrated using the healing spell, leaving Yuri and Erhardt amazed. The Grand Magus cast the same spell, showing that typical mages, including himself, only produced white light when they cast the spell. But Sei's heal spell produced golden sparkles. The knights she had healed back then reported seeing the same thing, but Yuri wanted to confirm for himself. He then thanked her for complying with his requests. On her way back, Sei recalled asking Yuri if he knew what those golden sparkles were, but he wasn't sure, and speculated it had something to do with her otherworldly origins, or something else entirely. However, she was pretty sure she had a good idea why that was. It was the same reason for everything that happened to her since she got here, and for the curse that made everything she did 1.5 times more powerful. Everything Sei had done had been a surprise to everyone around her. When she thought back on each and every one, it was all tied to the magic power she possessed. As Yuri made his report to Siegfried, the king asked to be left alone with him. He handed over the documents to the king, explaining that Sei's power far surpassed his own. The Prime Minister, Dominic Goltz, couldn't believe it, because Yuri was known as the most powerful mage in the kingdom. However, Yuri was able to measure Ira's potential without trouble. He concluded that Sei was blessed with an incalculable amount of magic power, while Ira possessed the unnatural ability to rapidly improve her skills. But he believed Sei was the saint. He once thought the golden sparkles that appeared when Sei casted magic were due to her being from another world. But those sparkles didn't appear for Ira, so he believed the phenomenon was a facet of Sei's sainthood. Furthermore, her spells were far more potent than a regular mage's, including Ira's. Dominic felt this would make things more complicated. If things went poorly, it could result in a crisis of succession. He confirmed to the king that Kyle had no plans of stopping whatever he was doing. Siegfried decided that Kyle's impropriety at the summoning and its behavior towards Sei could no longer be overlooked. He decided to formally invite her to the court as an honored guest. Later, Sei received the invitation letter and thought about declining, but she didn't want to make things difficult for the director, so she agreed. She would then meet with Marie, who would handle her preparations for appearance in court, along with some other maids. They bathed Sei and massaged her. Afterwards, when Sei looked in the mirror, she couldn't even recognize herself. Guys, I think she looks pretty much the same. Then, the maids got her dressed. Seeing the white garment, she knew they were pretty sure about her being the saint. After getting dressed, she went to see Albert, who came to visit her. He was here as her personal bodyguard and to escort her to the king's court. Although she looked a bit different, he complimented that she was as lovely as always. Sei was flushed as he held her face, staring into her eyes. Still, she was glad the commander was here with her. Upon entering the king's court, she looked quite nervous, but Albert's smile let her know that everything would be okay. As she walked up to the king, he properly introduced himself, apologizing for summoning her suddenly and for his son's uncouth behavior. He and all the members of court bowed to her. When she was summoned, they completely ignored her entirely and told her she couldn't go home, which made her incredibly angry. But she had decided to stay in this world. She fell in love with her work at the institute, and everyone around her was so wonderful. Although she hadn't completely forgotten the anger she felt in the beginning, living in this world now felt so right. Sei would then ask them to raise their heads to reward her for all her meritorious deeds. The king asked what she desired. She then requested permission to access the library's forbidden collection and also for a tutor, so she could learn more about magic. The king agreed, and the court applauded them. Later, Kyle was informed about what happened in the king's court. Even though people had already started whispering about Sei being the saint, he still believed his choice was the right one. He would stay the course until the right chance was upon them. Entering the classroom, Sei never expected that Yuri would be her magic tutor from now on. Sei assumed the Grand Magus would be too busy to teach her the basics, but he wouldn't entrust this task to anyone but himself. The kingdom deemed all knowledge of the saint's abilities as state secrets. As such, they wanted as few people as possible to know of her abilities. However, that wasn't the only reason. Yuri wanted to do his own research into her powers as well, and he could do that by observing her casts. Back at the Magi Assembly, Erhardt was shocked to hear Yuri was serving as the saint's personal magic tutor. Yuri would now get to spend more time with her and learn about her mysterious powers. Being the greatest mage in all the kingdom and a magical researcher, he spent little time on that, which didn't hold his interest. But once something caught his interest, he'd devote himself entirely to learning everything about it. He promised not to bring any harm to Sei, but Erhardt could hardly trust his words. During classes, Yuri would ask Sei to try transferring magic power to him, but she felt a little uncomfortable with how close he was. When she did it, he asked her to transfer a bit more power. When she opened her eyes after that, she noticed Yuri had a weird grin on his face. As he expected, her magic power was quite unusual. While it was aligned with the holy affinity, it was also aligned with something completely different. Sei asked if this something was the reason her potions were so powerful. Yuri wasn't sure enough to say yet, but he was eager to figure it out along the way. Soon after, Sei was exhausted from practicing her casting. Yuri mentioned that if she got better at manipulating her magic power, she'd be able to cast much more quickly. Sei cast her heal spell again, but the Grand Magus wasn't impressed, asking her to make it faster. He claimed she'd be able to do it if she cast it exactly as instructed. Sei wondered why he was putting her through the ringer when she had just learned how to do this. After she started getting lessons from Yuri, every now and then, she'd stumble across a worrying scene. The Grand Magus's training was apparently so intense, even the assembly's best and brightest admitted defeat after a day's work. She was sure Yuri meant it when he said he was going easy on her, and Sei felt he really believed she could do it if she tried. But for some reason, she just couldn't get it right. She felt she'd just need to practice harder. Thereafter, she'd go meet Albert, and seeing his blinding smile made her heart race. She wanted to practice during the night's drill, so she could get a better hand in more practical situations. He'd touch her face gently, hoping she wasn't pushing herself past her limits during training, but was kind of happy, while at the same time, he was kind of pushing the limits of her heart right now. Albert felt so happy to see her after her long absence. Then, he informed the knights that Sei would be assisting in her practice with healing spells. The following day, Yuri commended her for improving far faster than he had initially anticipated. When he asked what her personal goals were, she mentioned eventually joining the knights on expeditions. At least, she thought that was why she'd been doing all this practical training. However, Yuri explained one reason for his lessons was that he believed every mage should develop good control over their casts. The other was to study her abilities and magic power. Regardless, he admitted there were few people in the assembly who could cast holy attribute magic, and none of them were as skilled as her. Hearing that the next expedition might take the knights to the western woods, Sei was worried, recalling how badly they were injured last time. But Yuri promised to follow, ensuring no harm would come to her. If this were any other guy, her heart would start racing hearing this. However, it didn't, because she knew Yuri was only coming along wanting to study her more. The next day was a lady day for Sei. On lady days, she spent the day learning about things like etiquette and dancing. She'd meet up with Marie, who'd get her dressed up in a corset, nearly squeezing the life out of her. The maid explained that she needed to get accustomed to wearing gowns like these. During Sei's dance lessons, Albert would interrupt as he came to check on her. The dance instructor proposed that he help her practice. Marie was flustered as the commander extended his hand to her. He'd pull her in close, and as they danced beautifully, Sei was flush, stunned by his handsomeness. After the dance, they sat together, and Albert commended how well she was coming along. He couldn't dance half as well when he first began learning. With the social season coming up, there'd be plenty of formal dinners in the capital soon, and he was sure she'd be invited to a handful, though Sei didn't look interested. Albert also wasn't fond of social occasions, but he asked to be her date if she ever decided to go to one of them. She was flustered, hearing his sweet, sultry tone. She would then agree to have him as her date. 1 week later, Sei received an invitation to a tea party from the house of Marquis Ashley. According to Marie, his daughter was engaged to Crown Prince Kyle. Still, Sei wondered why such a high-ranking person would invite her to a tea party. Arriving at the venue, she met with Liz, who happened to be the Marquis's daughter. Liz teasingly mentioned that she'd been hearing about the Lady Saint and her good deeds recently. The two laughed about it awkwardly, given that Liz had no idea Sei was so talented at magic. Apparently, she knew Sei was summoned from another world right from the very beginning. She heard about the features of the woman who was summoned, and figured it out when she met Sei. It was also how she identified Ira as well. She reminded Sei of her classmate who was troubled by a new student, drawing the attention of her fiancé, and that new student happened to be Ira. Sei then explained that in their country, they didn't have the same customs as they had in this world. Japan was a lot more socially relaxed. Plus, having a fiancé at a young age wasn't normal there. Sei felt it could be resolved if the boys explained the problem to Ira, but Liz doubted they would, stating that if they were truly gentlemen in their midst, then it wouldn't be much of a problem. Liz's fiancé, Kyle, was also among Ira's admirers. Liz would then apologize for Kyle's rude behavior to Sei, but Sei didn't mind. After all, it wasn't her fault. The two would continue their chatting while enjoying their tea. Back when Ira was still in her world, she was about to step out to grab dinner when a magic circle suddenly appeared, summoning her to the kingdom of Salutania. When she regained composure, Kyle would introduce himself and have his aide, Damien, explain the situation to her. Hearing about monsters and miasma, Ira had no idea what Damien was talking about, and she wondered if this was all a dream. She asked if she could go home after killing all the monsters, but Kyle had never read any accounts of the saint returning to her world. Ira cried her eyes out as she realized she couldn't go back. Later, Damien informed the crown prince that Ira had cried herself to sleep. Kyle then asked Damien if he would die for his king when he became the next prime minister, to which Damien responded that he would. Likewise, Kyle said he would do the same. When Ira woke up, the maid suggested a pink, beautiful gown for her, but her eyes were on a dark blue one. It reminded her of a time back in Japan, when she was in the same situation and her mother insisted on a pink dress. But her father's compliment made her light up. She'd then meet with Kyle, who asked if she was lacking anything, but Ira claimed there was nothing. She had a room, clothes, and was being fed well. Plus, everyone was kind to her. Kyle told her it was expected, since she was a saint, but still, all of this didn't seem real to her yet. The prince would then take her to see the town. Ira was marveled by the sight of it all. When the people saw Kyle, they all made way for him. Even the soldiers quickly went back to their posts, hearing that the crown prince was making rounds. Seeing everyone's reaction, Ira wondered if they didn't like Kyle. When they were done sightseeing, the prince asked her what she thought of Salutania. Ira answered that it was a beautiful, lively kingdom. However, the prince felt it was too lively sometimes. Damien explained that they had to be strict with the people in order to uphold the kingdom's peace, though this manner of conduct didn't endear them to said people. Kyle would then tell her he would find a way to send Ira back home when this was all over, but he couldn't promise that he would succeed. Regardless, he humbly begged her to lend her power to keep the kingdom safe. Ira thought Kyle was extremely self-centered awkward, and direct to a fault. She didn't know what it meant to be a saint, but promised to do her best. Days later, she was given items to help her start learning magic, and she began attending the academy. She was having a lot of fun, but when Kyle told her she would assist with the monster-killing expeditions, she became scared. He assured her that Damien and the others, including himself, would keep her safe, and vowed to prove it to everyone that she was the most wonderful saint. After that, some of Ira's classmates warned her about being around Prince Kyle. Because he had a fiancée, Kyle would then show up and take her away quickly. On another day, while finding shelter from the rain, Ira saw a girl beside her and was conflicted on whether to approach her or not. But by the time she made up her mind, some of the other girls came and shared her umbrella with the person as they left. When Damien came to help Ira, she was already drenched, but she'd use her magic to lift the water from her clothes, completely drying herself. He was amazed at how she wielded magic so precisely. At night, Prince Kyle received a report about Say, and he thought it was so astounding that its contents seemed no more than falsehoods. He was furious about the powerful house that had stepped in to provide her patronage. He turned his back on Say that time because of her dull appearance. She looked no more than a servant or a wet nurse. So he didn't see a reason why he, the crown prince, should address a woman so clearly beneath him. It was a mistake of his stubborn pride, but he feared admitting it could trigger another quarrel over his succession. Damien explained that even if Ira wasn't the saint, the kingdom would find some other use for her, basically living her life as a captive in the palace. He felt guilty for taking Ira away from her home. As such, he needed to find a new place for her to call home. For now, he would continue with his plan until he could no longer. He would play the role of the incompetent, stubborn crown prince. After witnessing his arbitrary, reckless behavior involving Ira, the court would take pity on her. Of course, it would cause Damien much trouble, but handling that was his duty as Kyle's future prime minister. The following day, Liz would approach Ira, mentioning how unfavorable it was for her to be so close with a man who had a fiancé. Ira seemed a bit nervous, but surprisingly, Liz requested to join her. Just then, Kyle showed up to shield Ira. However, Liz explained that she only came to offer her assistance with Ira's studies. However, the crown prince refused, insisting he alone would look after her. Kyle's brother, Prince Rain, then came and informed him that the professor wanted to speak to him about next week's expedition. Ira would then leave with Kyle. Meanwhile, Rain mentioned he heard rumors about Say being the true saint, and it made him wonder how everyone would react then, when only one woman was already being put upon a pedestal. He was surprised to hear that Liz had met Say, and they were already friends. In the same way, Liz also hoped to become friends with Ira. At night, when Ira returned to her room, she remembered Liz's request and thought they would have been able to become friends then. So, she decided to say hi next time, even if she couldn't do it right and was awkward. On another day, Say went into the Forbidden Library and was happy to see a lot of information that wasn't available in the main one. Yuri would startle her as he snuck behind. He noticed she was looking up some poisonous plants, but she was thinking they could be used for medicine in small amounts. She was looking for herbs that weren't typically used in potion making, hoping they would open doors to new possibilities. Yuri then told her that plants, as well as all living things, possessed some magic in them. He speculated that her potions were so effective because the magic she imbued in them was different from other casters. He then suggested imbuing the plants themselves with her magic. Though he wasn't sure if it was possible, he felt Say might be able to pull it off. Afterwards, she tried imbuing a jar of water with magic, but it didn't work. Say recalled there was something called holy water in video games in her world. She asked Jude about it, but he'd never heard of such a thing. During lessons, she asked Yuri if he knew anything about it, explaining that holy water could be used to purify areas or take out undead monsters. And to make holy water, one would need to bless it. But even the Grand Magus hadn't heard of this either. He found the concept quite fascinating. He mentioned there was a type of magic effective against all monsters, but all he knew of it was that it existed, and nothing about its abilities or potency. There were records of casters who knew how to use it. This type of magic was called saintly conjury. As for how the saints used this conjury, he had no idea. This spell was used to purify miasma and destroy the monsters born of it. Back at the institute, Johann came across Say, who was working late. He had seen her casting spells in the garden and wondered if what she was working on was related. With Say explaining, Johann was surprised to learn that holy affinity magic could also work on plants. It was already known that water and earth affinity magic was already effective. The only thing she hadn't tried out was the saintly conjury she heard of. Johann had only heard of it in stories and rumors, and he hadn't read any detailed accounts of its use. Perhaps it wasn't the type of magic the casters thought to record for posterity. The names and the effects of spells they could cast were the same, no matter the potential or ability of the caster, so they found merit in preserving that information in tomes or grimoires to communicate it to other users of magic. Hence, Johann speculated that saintly conjury's use might be too specific, and its method of casting might have differed between saints. Thereafter, Say went out into the garden. Looking up at the sky, she noticed she could see so many more stars in this world. It was getting harder to remember her own world lately. Still, this world was so much warmer than the one she left, and so many wonderful people had lent her a helping hand. She wished she could do something to help them as well. Suddenly, a bright, golden light began glowing from her chest, and it began spreading magic around some plants. But she wasn't sure what was happening. The next day, Johann met her hard at work, crafting more potions for the nightly order. She only wished she'd been able to enhance more of the herbs. Say was so excited that her experiment was a success. However, she hadn't been able to cast that spell again. Johann apologized for not being able to be more of help, especially today. He informed Say that a messenger had come from the palace, requesting a healer to support them on their next expedition. Although she wasn't too excited, Say wanted to do whatever she could to prevent what happened to the knights back then. Days later, Say was shocked by Johann and Jude coming to see her off. That's when Albert showed up, assuring her that she'd be safe by his side the entire time. He'd come to accompany her. She would enjoy her ride in the carriage with the commander. Till Yuri showed up. He began probing her about the saintly conjury spell she used, and his questions kept going on, as if he were some insane mad scientist filled with curiosity. Say was overwhelmed, explaining that she hadn't been able to use the spell since that one time. She wasn't even sure if it was really the saint's conjury. Arriving at the western woods, Albert approached Say, noticing that she was still wearing the hair ornament he gave her. He told her it was enchanted, and that it would keep her safe no matter what might come. He was glad to see her wearing it today. Say got so flustered, she ran off with the excuse she was going to help with dinner. Moments later, as their expedition began, some of the monsters jumped out of the bushes towards Say, but Yuri and Albert would defeat them in the blink of an eye. She felt having the Grand Magus was overkill, but they couldn't let anything happen to her. Yuri found it quite odd that they hadn't encountered any large monsters, despite how deep they'd gone. Eventually, they arrived in an area that was much more dense with miasma. Ahead of them was a horde of mutated monsters. A salamander snuck up behind them, and as it blew its fire breath, Say protected the knights with a barrier. But the salamander's rampage attracted the attention of the other monsters. Yuri and Albert dove into action, taking out the beasts one by one. The situation quickly grew dire as more monsters began pouring out, and Albert, being the only one who could handle the salamander, was having a difficult time. As Say tried rushing to help, the salamander blew its fire at her. At that moment, her hair ornament conjured an ice wall to protect her, causing her to stagger, but Yuri would catch her. Meanwhile, Albert was quickly overwhelmed as his sword shattered, and one of the monsters bit his shoulder. Seeing this, Say cried out desperately, not wanting him to die. In the process, conjuring a wave of bright, golden light that shot out from her, defeating the monsters and purifying the whole area. Everyone bathed in the warm light that felt like a miracle. On the way back, Yuri was ecstatic, complimenting Say for her incredible display. He claimed it was one quite deserving of being labeled as true purification magic. The Grand Magus wanted to explore it much deeper, threatening that sacrifices must sometimes be made to advance the science of magic. Albert would tell him to stop joking about the matter. He then thanked Say for all she did today, letting her know that even if her powers weighed heavily upon her, she'd still be the same. Say believed the commander's words were true, but with everyone around whispering about her being the saint, she wished she could still believe those words. Back at the institute, she complained to Johann about the way everyone was acting weird around her. She didn't want to get used to it. With the way things were going, Say feared she might not get to stay at the institute. Johann told her that there were higher chances of that if she were to join the knights on expeditions in the countryside, far away from the capital. The capital was hardly the only place threatened by monstrous hordes. Towns and cities from all around had petitioned for the knights' assistance. Since the countryside was teeming with unique herbs and potion recipes, the director figured they could treat Say's extended tour as a chance to study them. That way, she'd still get to stay at the institute. During lessons, she tried imbuing a plant with magic, but it wasn't happening today. She didn't even know how it worked, and Yuri regretted that he missed the opportunity to verify her conjuring. Afterwards, they came across Kyle yelling at Liz. The prince believed Liz didn't really care about Ira, but instead was feeling jealous of another lady being around her fiancé. However, Liz didn't look the least bit bothered about that, so she told him it was ungentlemanly for a betrothed man to devote the majority of his time to another woman. He argued that he was responsible for protecting Ira, considering he summoned her without warning. Liz then pointed out Ira wasn't the only one he summoned, and he wasn't taking responsibility for the other woman. However, Kyle would retort that Say wasn't the saint, and assumed the people had sent someone they believed to be the saint in order to appease the masses. Hearing this, Liz became furious. Everyone would suddenly notice Say's presence. She turned to get help from Yuri, but he was nowhere to be found. As Kyle approached, she asked that he and Liz take their conversation somewhere more private. But the prince would silence her, and upon trying to grab her, Albert immediately stopped his hand. The king then showed up. That's where Yuri went, scolding his son for being foolish enough to cause a scene and insult the saint. Regardless, Kyle still argued that Say was only a saint his father had prepared. The king explained that both ladies had gone through an appraisal by Yuri, who concluded that Say was unmistakably the saint. He made it clear that Say had achieved so much, while Ira had barely any achievements. The king decided to continue this discussion elsewhere, and asked Liz to join them. In a private room, Kyle explained things to his father, accepting that the fault lay squarely upon his shoulders. He was prepared to accept whatever punishment, but asked his father to promise that Ira would be allowed to live freely, as she so wished. After vowing to do so, for punishment, Siegfried placed Kyle and all his companions under house arrest. Prince Rain would be entrusted with Ira's care and monitoring from now on, and Liz would also assist him in that regard. After that, Liz realized that Kyle had planned for this all along, though he pretended not to know what she was talking about. He only saw himself as a selfish, mistaken prince. Before leaving, he asked Liz to take good care of Ira. Later on, Say would join Liz and Ira for a tea party. While she was thinking about how to start a conversation with Ira, Liz brought up Say's work at the Institute. Say then told Ira about how she's been studying potion making. On the other hand, Ira wanted to keep studying magic, so Say suggested she join up with the Royal Magi Assembly. Liz had no doubts that they'd accept her. Plus, if she joined, Say would get to see her more often, and they could probably take classes together, and hang out with Liz as well. In the king's office, Damien informed him that while things near the capital had calmed, they had received more petitions from the countryside for aid. With the saint truly in their midst, regions near and far were calling for her assistance. Siegfried presumed that the region most likely in need of assistance was Clausner's domain. It was the kingdom's largest producer of medicinal herbs. Not only had they been hard hit by the miasma's monsters, but their herb production had decreased dramatically as well. Days later, Jude came across Say making a lot of potions, which made him worried because they were running out of herbs. With the import restrictions on herbs out of Clausner's domain, which was also called the alchemist's holy land, it made things more difficult. Johann then asked Say to bring some tea to his office, and also something that Albert would like. When she got there, the director asked her to drink with them. He mentioned that Albert would be away from the capital on a mission for a while. Since monster presence in the capital had lessened, he'd be heading out to the countryside, firstly to Clausner's domain. Say decided she'd be ready to join them, mostly because she wanted to learn more about the herbs there. The palace had also requested her presence, but Albert and Johann were initially opposed to the idea. Not only would their travels be dangerous, but if the knights were unsuccessful, the nobles would have harsh words for the commander. Say apologized for any trouble she might be causing, though Albert felt he should be the one apologizing, since they were always asking her for favors. Thinking back, ever since Say came to work at the Institute, she hadn't had any more bad experiences at the palace, and it was all thanks to Johann and Albert, who'd been protecting her like this behind the scenes. Arriving at the city, Say and Albert were welcomed by Daniel Clausner, the lord overseeing the region. Say would dress down out of her official attire and have some delicious tea, which her maid believed was infused with herbs rarely seen at the capital. She recalled Jude telling her that the alchemist's holy land would seem like heaven for her. They were alchemist families going back generations, each with their own secret recipes, and he believed Say might find a way to make potions stronger than high-grade ones. While having dinner, Say mentioned to Daniel that she makes plenty of potions for the Research Institute. He told her that there were many practitioners in the castle, including one who many called the best in the domain. Daniel offered to arrange an introduction, which she happily agreed to. After dinner, Say realized she was so distracted by all the talk of herbs, and she forgot to ask about the monster attacks. Luckily, Albert had already gathered that information from the palace guard. They'd spend a few days scouting the area, so Say could use the time to relax. Staring at her, Albert complimented how stunning she looked in that room. Her beauty nearly took his breath away. Say was flush, and she tried complimenting him, but she was too embarrassed and ended up running away. The The next day, Daniel introduced Say to Karina, the best alchemist in the castle. Karina was just about to start making a batch of potions, and Say was very happy to help and learn from the master alchemist. Moments later, the old woman was shocked at how many potions Say had made, and was even more surprised that she could keep making more. She didn't think the saint would outdo her in her own workshop. Leonhard would then enter the shop, and the first thing Say noticed was his huge arms. He came asking for the potions they had ordered. Karina scolded him because these orders usually took time. Luckily, the potions were ready, all thanks to Say. Leo then introduced himself to her as the captain of the mercenary company stationed in the castle. He'd shake her hands roughly and boisterously, causing Karina to scold him again. Seeing his demeanor, Say thought he was just like a big, clumsy dog. At night, Karina confirmed to Daniel that Say was truly the saint, but she wasn't sure if Say could bless their fields yet. However, the saint was witnessed casting golden magic, which was the same as described in a diary Daniel mentioned. Karina believed if they showed Say the alchemist's diary, she might discover how to perform the blessing herself. On another morning, Karina commended Say for memorizing most of her house's recipes. Likewise, Say was very happy for the chance to come here and learn from her. The old woman had also learned plenty from Say, comparing it to how wheat could provide an additional health boost. If wheat was mixed into a potion, Say wondered if it would become more effective than high-grade ones. Karina told her that something like that existed long ago, but not anymore. She then showed Say a diary, which was written by a great alchemist, the mother of Clausner's alchemic know-how. Say then spent her time reading the contents of it. The great alchemist loved the people of Clausner's domain and the land they called home. She had never been to the capital, but was sure Clausner's domain would outshine it. One year, a horrific flop plagued the land. Crops were dying, and their precious herbs had all wasted away. The famine lasted over a month, and everyone was slowly starving. The alchemist was very desperate to help, wondering what she could do. Eventually, a horrible disease spread amongst the people, and her darling younger brother, Kurt, was bedridden with it. She could barely stand to see how gaunt his chubby, rosy cheeks had now become. Refusing to let this famine continue, her research taught her how to craft new forms of medicine. However, she couldn't cultivate the needed herbs to cure her brother, so she was left wondering if there was any way to restore vitality to the land. Hoping and praying for her darling brother not to die, she kept thinking about him, when suddenly, a brilliant gold flowed across the fields. The famine came to an end, and their crops began to grow once more. Kurt's cheeks grew plump and rosy once again. She dubbed this magic a blessing, seeing as it was Kurt who gifted it to her. She wondered if the great alchemist was a saint, and how she was able to cast the blessing. Hearing some commotion, she rushed outside, and was shocked to see so many wounded mercenaries. Leo explained that they ran into some rare monsters in the forest. Luckily, the potions she made were of great help to them, but still, some of the soldiers were gravely wounded. She offered to heal them with magic, but was too nervous to reveal that she was the saint. The soldiers were surprised when she cast healing magic, because this was their first time seeing it. Leo then mentioned that the knights might need her help because they ran into a nasty group of monsters out there. Fearing the worst might have happened to Albert, Say quickly casted an area healing spell and then ran off to meet the knights, hoping she wouldn't arrive too late. She'd come across some knights all gathered around him. She would shove past them, and upon seeing him covered in blood, her fear only grew more. Clutching her hands desperately, a golden light burst forth from her. However, it turned out Albert wasn't as gravely injured as she thought. She later apologized for causing such a fuss, but the commander appreciated the thought of her worrying about his health. Still, they wondered how she was able to use that magic just now. Say slowly realized it was because Albert was in danger. Seeing his beautiful face as he stared at her, she ran off, feeling too embarrassed to tell him how she truly felt. But she knew now that the saint's power was the power of love. On another day, Yuri complained to Erhardt about not being informed when Say and the knights had departed. But Erhardt demanded the Grand Mages finish the work he had to do. Just then, one of the mages came in, reporting that the Second Order of Knights had sent a missive urgently requesting their help, and Yuri put on a huge smirk. The new recruits then saw him sprinting away while it chased him from behind. The Grand Mages suddenly stopped and approached Ira, asking her to come with him. All the while, Say was practicing her saintly conjury by thinking of all the friends she had. The golden light only appeared when her mind thought of Albert, making her feel embarrassed. Thereafter, Marie would serve her some tea, and the saint commended her for being so good at what she did. Marie didn't think much of it, since being skilled at her many duties was simply part of her job. This gave Say the idea to treat the saint's conjury as just part of her job, so she wouldn't have to think too hard about it. She'd then meet with Karina, asking for help to experiment with her blessing. They would go somewhere else, where Karina asked Say to test her blessing on some potted plants. While thinking of Albert, Say was able to cast her blessing, but the only way to tell if it worked was to keep an eye on the seeds to see if they would sprout. After that, Leo would then come over and surprisingly ask Say to join his mercenary company. He felt alchemy was a waste of her talents. Karina warned him to give up on Say, but Leo couldn't just let her walk away without trying. Albert then came across them, and he looked very upset by what Leo was trying to do. He made it clear that Say wouldn't be joining the mercenaries, because she came from the capital with the knights. That's when Leo finally realized she was the saint. With that settled, Albert requested to speak with Say alone, so Karina dragged Leo by the ear and left with him. Albert informed Say they were done with the scouting and would like to begin their expedition to the woods. From here on out, she'd be joining them, since not many of the mages could cast healing magic. And though he assured they wouldn't encounter hordes of monsters all at once, they were still yet to discover one of the dark swamps. Say thought getting rid of one earlier would solve all their problems. Plus, working herself to cast a blessing was very annoying to her, for reasons. Albert noticed she looked flush, but she was too embarrassed to explain why. Before heading out, Albert needed to speak to his men. He asked Say if she wanted to give them an encouraging speech as well, but she nervously declined. Then, he'd extend his hand to help her in the carriage. Say thought she'd never get used to his gestures. As she went in, he stared at her intently while smiling, and his charming looks left her flush once again. Soon after, they'd set up camp in the woods. Say was excited to start exploring and find some new herbs. When Leo showed up, Albert didn't like his presence one bit, but the captain of the mercenaries was just happy to be of service. During their exploration, Say was looking at some interesting herbs. Leo was surprised that she worked at the research institute while being the saint as well, but she took her saint work as more of a side job. He wondered if their kingdom would be okay with her attitude, and both she and Albert agreed at the same time that it would. While Say and Leo engaged in a little conversation about their hometowns, a soldier informed Albert that there were signs of a dangerous monster nearby. They saw traces of slime and digestive juice. Given that physical attacks could barely do damage to slime, Albert thought it best to avoid engaging in combat if possible. Magic was more effective against them. As they ventured deeper, they came across more traces of the slime juice. Suddenly, they were surrounded by a group of slimes. Albert used his ice magic to protect Say, while she used her magic to conjure a golden barrier. But they couldn't keep this up for long, as the soldiers were struggling to battle the slimes. Eventually, the monsters were joined together to form one huge slime. At that moment, huge tornadoes of fire erupted, killing the creatures. And Say was shocked to see Ira here. That was when Yuri made his presence known as well. The Grand Magus unleashed his firestorm spell and rushed forward, clearing a path for everyone to escape. Days later, Say and Karina observed the seeds that Say had blessed starting to sprout. Karina decided they'd move on to a bigger portion of the soil, and she let Say know that she had already got permission from Lord Clausner. As Say cast her conjury upon the soil, Yuri showed up, asking why she hadn't cast it for him yet, and if she hated him or was punishing him. Say explained that she was simply practicing her casting here, and that they wanted to make sure the saint's conjury wouldn't harm the plant. He would then examine the soil, sensing a peculiar magic aura within it. He speculated that the magic power might have flowed directly into the soil, or it might have imbued the minerals within the soil with magic. These were just hypotheses, so he and Karina agreed they'd need to perform more tests to confirm. Say could tell that they were basically two peas in a pod. They then moved to a large portion of farmland, where Say asked to bless the soil there. By the time they were done, she was exhausted from using up so much of her magic power. Yuri told her that repetition was the key to mastery, and with more training, she should be able to cast it even faster. She doubted that was possible, considering she had to prep herself before casting the magic. When Yuri asked what kind of preparation she needed, Say found it difficult to put it into words. Albert would then come in, informing Yuri that they had completed their plans for resuming their failed expedition. Yuri took a look and found no problems with the proposed plan. In fact, he was quite thrilled to face the toxic slimes. On Say's way to join up with the soldiers, Ira met up with her, hoping they'd be in the same squadron. Ira was tasked with being on healing duty because the other mages told her the Grand Magus wouldn't be healing. When they got outside, Say was greeted by the soldiers as well as Leo. Albert and Yuri also met up with them, and upon seeing the Grand Magus, Leo referred to him as the Infernal Fiend. He had earned that nickname from how he torched huge swaths of monsters to a crisp. Say hoped he would restrain himself and not burn down the entire forest. Moments later, they went back to the woods and began fighting the monsters all around. Seeing that there were a lot more monsters this time, Yuri figured they were quite close to the miasma swamp. Say would then remind him to spare the forest from his fire. As soon as they got into the miasma-dense area, they were quickly surrounded by toxic slimes. Everyone with a magic ability began fighting back. While Say was healing a soldier, a slime was about to fall on her. That's when Albert would step in to protect her and ended up getting hurt instead. In her desperation to save him, Say was about to use her saintly conjury. But Yuri stopped her, telling her not to use it yet, since the ability used too much magic power. He asked her to save it until they reached the swamp. Suddenly, the slimes merged together, forming a huge mutated bear that attacked them. Moments later, they arrived at the swamp. However, most of the soldiers already looked completely beaten up. Yuri asked if Sei could purify the miasma from their current distance, but she needed to get a little closer. They'd have to fight their way through, since they were too entrenched now. Yuri cleared a path forward for Sei to cast her magic, but she'd get distracted by one of the monsters that was about to attack Leo. She rushed to help, but in front of the beast, she was frozen in fear. With no other choice, Yuri released his powerful infernal magic, setting the forest ablaze. With Albert protecting her, Sei released her conjury spell, purifying the entire swamp and a huge bathing of light. When they returned to camp, she kept recalling how burnt the place was and how Yuri seemed very upset. Albert noticed she looked quite down. He then advised her to get some rest because it had been quite a day. He'd walk her to her tent, and just as they were about to part ways, they both turned to face each other. Sei thought it was selfish to want anything more from him. Still, she couldn't let him go like this. As a knight, the commander told her that he had pledged his sword to the king, but he also requested the honor of pledging his sword to her, desiring to grant her every wish. Sei expressed her happiness, feeling moved by his words. They would return to the forest the next day, where Sei tried to use her blessing once more. But she was a bit unnerved by the way Yuri was staring at her. However, as Albert held her hands, memories of him flashed through her mind, and she'd unleash her blessing, restoring the land to its former glory. Everyone was amazed, watching the land become green once more. Sei would suddenly pass out right after. When she came to, she was flustered, seeing herself being carried by Albert. Yuri teased this was her punishment for worrying them, while Ira was gushing over their romance. Sei kindly asked to be allowed to walk, so Albert put her down and asked to be allowed the honor of supporting her as she walked. Before leaving the city, Karina thanked Sei for all her help, remarking that only a monster like her could craft so many potions in a day. Leo also bid her farewell and let her know she was always welcome to come here if she started hating the capital. As Sei departed with Albert, Leo commended how incredible the saint's power was. However, Karina claimed it wasn't just her magic power, but that incredible power was something they all possessed inside themselves. It was none other than the power of love. Wow, guys, is that true? Is the power of love that incredible? I don't know about all of that, but I do know I enjoyed watching the series. It was a slow burn, but the only part I didn't really like was Prince Kyle's bit with Ira. Otherwise, the show was pretty pleasant. What do you guys think? Subscribe for more content, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.